All right, we are back with Phil Jones from Sound United. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. And of course, we're always here talking about some of the same topics, and we seem to go round and round and round with HDMI 2.1.
HDMI, yeah, 2.1. It's the root of all evil in our industry.
Exactly. And I will tell you that I've taken kind of HDMI 2.1 as kind of my obsession or pet project
Hmm.
since since the inception of 4K. And after 4K, that's when things just got wacky. And because not only am I at Sound United as the director of training and content, I also have another stake in this because I am the owner of Projector Reviews. So whether it's a receiver or whether it's a projector, so
Yeah.
audio and video, both sides of that really matters.
What do
And
you got back there? You got some slick
ah,
stuff back there. What
yeah.
is
So
that?
so I have an 8015. Oh, actually over there. You
Yep.
know that side, and then that's just a little 40 new 1700, which is a new uh, uh, entry into X series Denon receivers.
Uh-huh.
And behind me, Rob from JVC just dropped off a NZ9, which is their 8K, eShift X
Whoa.
48 gigabit input HDMI projector. So when people keep asking about 8K projectors or can I play 8K or 4K 120,
Hmm.
it's that bad boy right there. That is one of the ones that can do it. That's
How
about, I
much?
think,
How much is that projector? It's like 10 grand.
20
Oh,
plus. You
oh, so
know,
it's up there. Yeah.
yeah, it's that is the king. That is the JVC king. That is their flagship heavy hitter. But all of this stuff has to work together, and
Yeah.
so you have to have. So whether you have a PlayStation, an Xbox, a gaming computer, a 8K enabled receiver, and an 8K projector or 8K TV, it all has to work together. And the thing that allows it to work together is HDMI or,
Yeah.
or HDMI 2.1.
So we published an article a few days ago about HDMI 2.1 compliance and how it's kind of maybe not all cracked up at what people think it's going to be or what it's going to be and how they're certifying HDMI 2.1 ready products.
Mhm.
I wanted to have you on to elaborate about that because this is kind of a big deal. It's another way for manufacturers to put a stamp on a box when it doesn't necessarily mean much
Mhm.
to the end user, especially if someone is wanting certain features, especially if they're a gamer
Mhm.
and they want to have the latest features in HDMI 2.1. They're going to buy an HDMI, allegedly an HDMI 2.1 product,
Mhm.
hook it up, and then it might not work the way they expected because it's lacking some of the features that are supposed to be standard in HDMI 2.1.
Yes, and that's true because the whole premise of HDMI 2.1, it is a group of features that could be added, and it would have been a lot easier to say if it was certified, you had to hit all of the features. When I first saw HDMI 2.1, I'm like, great, it has to have this type of bandwidth, it has to support VR, it has to support auto latency mode, it has to support dynamic HDR. That's what I thought, and if you saw that, you put the label in the box. Well, HDMI came out and said you shouldn't be using the label anyway.
Mm,
That is an internal industry label, HDMI 2.1. So maybe deep in a spec sheet, you may see HDMI 2.1, 4K 120 to kind of basically tell you how they're doing it, right? But it should be the manufacturer should be putting the features on. It supports VRR. It supports auto latency mode. It supports 40 gigabit HDMI, okay, which gives you 4K 120 and 8K 60. You should not see on the box. The only thing you see on the box is HDMI 2.1. You'll see the HDMI logo, but you should not see a version that on the box. And that's one of the things that causes a lot of confusion.
all right. Well, you got a slide presentation that could hopefully get into some of this. Quick question, product related question. I'm going to put you on the spot if you don't mind me asking.
Mhm.
This guy here is asking, when are we going to see an update on the 2000, 3000, 4000 series have 3 or more ports instead of having to buy a switch box?
Okay, so we're going to get into this. Like a lot of times people say, well, some of the other guys have 3 inputs and you only have 1. And that has to do with whether their box or the board that they used applied compression or whether it was uncompressed. And we're going to talk about that. That's another confusion thing with HDMI 2.1.
Yeah, for sure.
When our units were built, if you had a choice between multiple port compressed or single port uncompressed, and we said single port uncompressed because that's going to give you more future capabilities. But like I said, there's 2 ways to go. Now, you will start seeing, and for example, the AV 1700 has 3 HDMI 40 gigabit 2.1 ports that are HDMI 2.1. Don't worry about that, but it supports VRR, auto latency mode, quick media switching, variable refresh rate, blah blah blah. So they're coming, but that board did not exist. As we do model refreshes, remember, because when you put a new board in, how it's wired is different. So it isn't like swap out one board and swap in another. So as we're trying to make your product that you already have extend the life. There's when it comes to Dolby Vision or HDR10 Plus or Dolby Atmos or DTSX or DTX Virtual X or IMAX Enhanced, none of that stuff is changing. The main thing is by adding that 3-port box that we're going to be offering, it allows you to extend the life of your receiver until you hit the maximum number of inputs, and then you can keep that until Mega IMAX comes out. So this allows us to extend the life of people who already bought it. They maybe have 1 game system and now they bought a second, or finally they come up with an 8K Blu-ray or an 8K movie device. It allows them to continue using the pieces they have for longer and longer times.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's get into it.
Okay. So let's talk about a few things. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of terms, and we want to make it a lot easier for you to remember those terms. So I actually provided Gene a portion of this document, the CTA document. And what happened was a bunch of manufacturers and a bunch of industry experts got together and put together a standards and recommendations for those who install systems that utilize HDMI. So this is made for the CTA, Consumer Technology Association, as well as CEDIA members, custom installers. Now, because in order to get this full document, you need to be a member. But I've talked to them. Joel Silver from Joel Silver from ISF was the chair on this, and we did a whole video on this particular a document, which you can see on our SoundUnited.com, Sound United Training YouTube channel. But he did allow me to give some of this document to everyone, consumers out there. And the main part is there's a whole lot of acronyms, AL, auto low latency mode, DSC, VRR, and all of those, hot plug detect and all that stuff. The document that Gene can share with you guys has all of those explanations of those terms. Okay. If you're a CEDIA member or you're a CTA member, the full document will be available to you on their website. So we're going to talk a lot of tech here, and you're going to be like, how am I going to remember all of these numbers and names and stuff like that? That kind of content will be available in this particular document. Now, the whole thing about this HDMI thing was the goal is each time there's a new version, it's supposed to make the system better, supposed to give you more stuff, better video, better audio, enhanced gaming, a better user experience. Now, you're going to hear a lot of conversation here about bandwidth. But that bandwidth is only for the video enhancements. Certain video enhancements would have to do with resolution and frame rate. 90% of the benefits that you're going to get from HDMI 2.1 on a day-to-day basis for many customers will have nothing to do with the extended bandwidth, which is why some of these features can actually be utilized in HDMI 2.0A, basically older, how Denon and Marantz can go in and add some of these features to older AVRs via firmware updates, okay? But the best way to think of it is there's 2 benefits to HDMI 2.1. Two. All right. The first benefit is it supports higher bandwidth. And with higher bandwidth means support of higher resolutions and higher frame rates. So the 4K 120 and the 8K 60. Currently, that's only for gamers. There's not a 4K 120 movies. Studios are shooting at 24 because they like the way it looks, not because they have to. There's no 8K 60. Maybe in the future with broadcast for like the Olympics and sports, you may see that. But right now, the way you would generate this is on a powerful gaming console or a very powerful computer. And that is where this extra bandwidth is required. So when you hear the 40 gigabits per second, or 48 gigabits per second, or 32 gigabits per second, that is to support the higher resolution and the higher frame rates. Now, the other parts of this is an enhanced user experience and enhanced functionality. Things to make gaming better, things to make audio better, things to make video playback better, but those do not require an increase in bandwidth. So there's two parts. The bandwidth part is easy because I can measure the bandwidth, and I can and a cable company has to put that number on the box. You know what I mean? They got to say it's ultra high speed, it's high speed, it supports 8K 120, it supports 4K 120, you know, but on a box, they better have the bandwidth. All right.
So if you get an HDMI cable and it says 48 gigabits, I mean, that's gone through a certification process where it will actually work all the time at 48
yes,
gigabits.
they can, because think of it this way. If I put 48 gigabits on the box, and I take my 7G, my 8K 7G and my 8K 7A, and I plug those two together and it doesn't pass, I sue you. That's the benefit of a number like that. 2.1, it's got 2.1. Well, it only has one thing, so they can get away with it. But if I say 40 gigabits per second or 48 gigabits per second at this length, if it doesn't test that way, that's false advertising, right? So that's the benefit of bandwidth, is it can be tested, you know? So
are there HD-based balance that support 48 gig? Because as far as I know, they're only up to 18.
Well, that's a good question. So if I go here,
sorry, I don't want to like jump you around, but I'm just
well, let's talk about that. Currently, maybe right now, an HDMI cable can really currently pass. I mean, a Cat 6, which is used for HDMI extenders or balance.
Yeah. Normally,
the bandwidth that can be passed through that is normally 10 gigabits per second. But by using lossless compression and decompression, I can actually send 18 down there, which is enough for 4K 60 in HDR, right? So most of the balance are using some sort of compression to take 18 in, knock it down to 10, send it down, and compress it back and expand it back to 18. And if I put two measuring devices on there, I will see 18 and no loss in picture quality.
Okay.
Trying to send 48 down that line requires an even extensive compression scheme, which may not be possible. But that's why you're starting to see fiber, because fiber can support up to 100 gigabits per second per strand. Okay. Right. At distances that are hundreds of feet. So I tell people all the time to start off with if you're going to pull Cat 6, great, but pull a piece of fiber. I would prefer you pull a piece of fiber and use fiber-based balance at 18, because guess what? When you need 48, you just swap out.
Upgrade the balance.
You upgrade the balance. The cable is already ready. The cable's already ready. So that is the only way you're going to do it. So currently, if you want to do long 48 gig HDMI transfer, like you're going to need for a projector, like the one behind me, it's going to be active optical. Okay. That's going to be the way to go.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm installing a bullet train cable in the family room system next week. So I'm looking forward to testing that out.
Yeah. I have a 48 gig connected to the, this projector is going up into the Sound United reference theater to replace the NX9 for testing, and it's gonna and also we have a Sony Master Series 85-inch 8K TV, and both of those are connected via bullet trains. I think it's like a 20 meter and a 40 and a 30.
A good comment right here. So basically, the cable situation is different because you have a certification process, like you're saying.
Yes, exactly. So if you go back to the cable, it's simple. There's a logo that's on the box. You're not going to see 48. Okay, you're not going to see HDMI 2.1. You're going to see ultra high speed. High speed is 18. Ultra high speed is is 48. Period. Okay, they can't put the ultra high speed logo on there until it's tested and it can pass 48. All right. Simple. Right now, when it comes to inputs on your receiver, you'll notice that they'll say, "Oh, this says it supports 48 gigabits uncompressed at 8K 60 and 4K 120." But people go look at us and they go, "Well, your receiver only has one input, and I could buy brand B that has 3 inputs that support 4K 120." But what they aren't telling you is there's 2 ways to pass that signal: compressed and uncompressed, right? So if you look here, I actually provided these with Gene, or you can get them from Meridio. If you go to meridio.com and go to their resource page, you can see the different bandwidths that are supported by this particular HDMI system. And it supports both compressed and uncompressed, all right? Some manufacturers chose the single input that is uncompressed, and some manufacturers chose the 3 input or multi-input that is compressed. So if you look at this, 4K 120 requires either 44 gigabits per second 40 gigabits per second uncompressed, or 18 gigabits compressed. All right. So if I tell you that a Marantz receiver has a 40 gigabit input, it will support 444, which is all the maximum color sampling, 10-bit, which is the maximum your TV can display because it's a 10-bit panel at 120 frames per second. It's the best signal that you can send a modern display. I don't care how much you spend, uncompressed. Or I can compress it and send it at 18, right? So you're not comparing apples to oranges. So if you see 2 models and one's less expensive with 3 inputs, the question is that input compressed or uncompressed? Now, right now you may look at it and say, well, who cares? Because they're both passing 4K 120, and theoretically with the compression, you're not going to see a difference. But when you can, if you wait and use the compression for 40 and 48 gigabits per second, your system will now pass 10K at 120 frames per second, while the other one will always only be able to pass 4K. Does that make sense?
10K.
Yeah. So if you look later at that little chart, yes, 40 and 48 gigabits per second can support up to 10K at 120 frames per second when you apply DSC compression. So
we're years away from seeing those kind of resolutions.
Yeah. But the goal is to have, we don't have to do this standard again. Hopefully it'll, by the time you surpass 10K at 120 frames per second, you can take your flying car to go buy your new display, right?
Yeah, or we'll have holodecks by then.
Exactly. But let me give you a quick tip. If you look at it, you got to look at the fine print when the manufacturer is talking about the inputs they're using, right? You will see 4K 120A or 4K 120B or 4K 120AB. And the A and B are itty bitty along the bottom. They legally have to put that in there on their spec sheet. They don't have to tell you it's compressed. They can just say it supports 4K 120B. Okay. And if you don't know A and B, you're not getting the full information. So A means uncompressed. B means compressed. AB means it supports compression and uncompressed. Does that make sense?
So
And
if I go to the Denon website and I look up a 3700 receiver,
mhm.
in the fine print on the manual or on the page, it'll
The
say,
spec sheet will tell you and everything else. In fact, if I go to the receiver, it'll tell you inside what it's passing. So if you go to a Denon or Marantz receiver, you go into the menu system, you go to general, and you go to the there's two displays that are there.
mhm.
One, signal information, what is being fed, and
Oh,
the
A.
other one is display, what's going through. So if you look at it, it says it supports resolution 4K 24 AB at 8K AB, 8K 60 AB. Okay. It tells you what it is. It
Right.
tells you what's going through it. We're being honest. We are, and I'm telling you, that is what matters. If you look, you'll see and you can check everything. Like, for example, an LG TV doesn't supports Dolby Vision, and it'll say Dolby Vision as one of the options, but a Samsung does not, but it'll say HDR10 plus. This will actually tell you that. It'll tell you what the source is sending and what the display can actually accept and what's going through the system. So we can actually tell you what features you're getting from HDMI 2.1 when it comes to bandwidth and functionality just by looking at the menu system.
So the screen on the left where it says resolution 8K 24A, is the A also designate uncompressed?
Yep. Yeah. A is where 8K 24A. Yes. So A means uncompressed.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah. No one ever tells you that.
I never knew it. No, I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. A is compressed. A is uncompressed. B is compressed. AB means both. So right now, the signal being fed is 8K24A. Okay. The system that supports 8K60A and 8K60AB, but the source that's being fed right now is 24A.
What was your
Okay.
source in that example?
I think we were using like take a computer, shot some footage and things like that. What you'll normally see the most in most gaming systems is going to be 4K 120. And by the way, if you see VRR, a gaming system is not going to give you VRR and 120 frames per second. VRR means variable. I'm going to change, and I can change up to 120 frames per second. But if it's a really difficult piece of graphic, a person standing in front of a forest, the frame rates on the computers are going to go down. So that's what variable refresh rate means. It means that the frame rates go up and down based on what's being fed. The maximum could be 120, but when you see variable refresh rate, what you can be looking at could be 37, 67, 96, all the way up to 120, depending on the capability of the computer and how powerful your system is. Okay. So like I said, bandwidth is easy because the receiver will tell you what's going on. The cable has the logo on it. If you ask a manufacturer, we will tell you we support 40. If you talk to JVC, they'll tell you this new projector has 48s on it. They will tell you what that input is. But when we get into the other stuff is when we get a little iffy. Okay. So, but yeah, AB, remember that.
Gotcha.
Apples to apples. And that hopefully that's why people understand why we chose one input at the time we did it. Because if I sell you the box, now you have three 10K 120 frame per second inputs. If I had put the less expensive one in, I will never have that capability. You follow me? So that's an important point. I will say that the other major is A. If you look at, with the exception of the AVR 1700, which has most of the other receivers from other manufacturers that have more than 3 8K 120 inputs will be parentheses B, compressed. Okay. And you just have to look at the fine print.
Yeah, we got to definitely pay more attention to that. I appreciate you bringing that out. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So that's moving. So like I said, the input and the source, that stuff is easy. As I mentioned, the main thing you have to be concerned with is 40. 40 is the magic number. When I got into 8K, when I got into 4K HDR, 4K 60 HDR. People were throwing out 444 and all this stuff, but it could be 8-bit 444. It could have been 12-bit 420. Nobody was giving you the real deal. So I said, when we went around, I just went around and said, with the manufacturer, said, show me a cable that you make that supports 18 gigabits at distances that exceed 5 meters. Crickets, right? So 18 became the thing. Support 18, you're good for HDR at 60 frames per second. Okay, from an Xbox, a PlayStation, an Apple TV, a Roku, a 4K Blu-ray, a Kaleidoscope, 18 is what you would need to get all of that out of that machine, right? When we talk about 8K and 4K 120, the magic number is 40. Everything above that is gravy. It's like providing your TV 48 is like telling a Volkswagen to go 300 miles an hour. It knows what you want to do. It can't do anything with it, but it knows what you want to do. All right. So 40 is the magic number. So when you look at a cable or system, it needs to support at least 40 to do uncompressed 4K 120 on a modern display. Okay. I want to stress that. Okay. So like I said, bandwidth, not a problem. And it could be, now here's an interesting thing that people may not know. Say you're going to go out and buy an HDMI cable, a 48 gigabit passive HDMI cable, and you had the option between a 1 meter and a 2 meter. Always buy the 2 meter, because I sat down with Matt Murray from Meridio and AV Pro, and a few other guys like Brett from Metro and stuff like that. The optimum length to really form the speed and get the speed you need is 2 meters. If you have a 1 meter, it's not long enough. It's almost like the Sprinter can't get up to speed. Okay, so 2 meter cables seem to be incredibly efficient.
It's funny that you said that, because I was having some intermittent issues with my HDMI Ballums I was using, the AV Pro Edge, and one thing they told me to do is the cable behind my TV was too short.
Exactly, because you'll
like
get
a
the
half
balance,
meter.
and then you get the little half meters, and the half meters are causing a problem. 2 meter cables, okay? Now, the thing that's interesting about this is if you went out and bought a really good AudioQuest, a really good Metra, a really good high-quality cable, it's a very good chance that 18 gigabit cable that you bought that was high speed, it's probably also ultra high speed. It just was not measured for that, because it all depends on the quality of the insides and what parts, what gauge of wire they put inside of the HDMI cable. So a lot of people's high quality, high end 2 meter cables will probably still be fine for passing 8K 120 or 4K 60 or 8K 24, which is probably what movies are going to be in. You'll probably be perfectly fine using the cable that you already own. You won't have if it fails or it says it doesn't pass it, then go buy it. Don't just go buy it because you immediately, because if you have a high-end cable, you may not need it. So that's something. That's another tip from Phil.
Where do you think our 8K sources are going to come from first? It's not, obviously there's not a Blu-ray that's 8K. Nope. So it's going to be streaming.
The first 8K sources, I'm going to play Nostradamus here, because it was like this with 3D, it was like this with 4K, and it was like this with HDR. The first 8K sources are going to be streaming services sponsored by the TV manufacturer for their specific TV. Okay, so it'll be Samsung will have Samsung 8K, and it'll be an app in their in the Samsung TV that that they paid for the footage, and it's sponsored by them. And it'll be Sony 8K, or an LG 8K, because they're going to pay the check and deal with it, and it's going to be a streaming device. That is why things like eARC are important, because people will go out and buy a Ballon does not have eARC, and guess what? You have this 8K piece of content they made that has Dolby Atmos, and the picture looks great, but you can't get the audio from the TV to your AVR unless you have eARC. So as you look at your Ballons or your extenders, you got to make sure that they support ARC, or ARC at a minimum. eARC is definitely preferred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're not going to be getting like Squid Games in 8K anytime soon.
You could. I mean, like I said, you could, but the issue would be, and it was this way with 4K. How many 4K broadcast channels do you see now?
Well, none on cable.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
a cable manufacturer would have to give up 4 regular broadcast channels
Mm-hmm.
to give you one 4K channel, or 16 8K 4K HD channels to give you that. When it comes to Netflix, the bandwidths were getting higher, so by applying compression, 10 to 17 megabits per second, I have an efficient compression scheme to give you a good looking 4K signal. Now, as internet speeds get up, what's going to be the minimum? You got to apply a more aggressive compression scheme to get it down into the 17, 20, so you don't get stuttery footage, So until the compression gets more efficient or bandwidths increase more, why would Netflix do it? Because it would be a huge amount of money. Every movie would cost more. It's 4 times the storage space, 4 times the cost for every minute of video costs 4 times more because the storage space is 4 times more. Cameras are bigger. Sets have to be done at a higher level. The bandwidth to transfer it because of the current compression schemes that are out has to be higher. So what's the motivation? Now, somebody brought up H266. Yeah, as they get that kind of stuff down, or HEVC and things like that, maybe you'll see it. But so as compression always is getting better, so it's going to happen. But right now, the first ones that are going to come is going to be complements of
demo material, basically.
The big 3 making demo material or sponsoring. Like Sony, we did the World Cup in 4K. So when you'd walk into a Best Buy store, when I was there, it was the first 4K footage and 4K 60 you ever saw. Was 4K 60 HDR footage you ever saw was World Cup footage that was shot by Sony for their displays. Okay, so that's something to think about. What is a balun? Is that a fancy way of saying HDMI over Cat 5, Cat 6? You are right, Chris. So there's 2 terms you'll hear, and that's why we gave you that. That's why we're going to give you that that glossary of terms. You will hear the term extender or balun. And what that does is that takes HDMI, converts it into either fiber or Cat 6 or Cat 5, and then sends it down the line and reconverts it back to HDMI. So the term that you will hear in the industry is either an HDMI extender or an HDMI balun. Just make sure you get good ones because they can impact your picture, or they may not pass some of the functionality you want, like enhanced audio return channel. Okay.
Yep.
So like I said, we talked about testing. There's plenty of tools out there that are coming. These are both from Meridio. There's an 8K signal analyzer and generator. I actually have this. I have both of these. I also have this 7G that we use for testing, like things like this big projector back here and displays. So there's plenty of tests. But I always tell people the biggest tip, because I'm getting ready to remodel my house, and I pulled Cat 6. I didn't pull fiber because they have to repaint my walls and retexture my walls. I am running conduit everywhere. And I'm going to put fiber in it and Cat 6 in it. Why? Because if anything happens and something else becomes better, that Cat 6 wire becomes a pull wire for the next thing that's going to go in my house.
That's a good point.
So if you can run conduit from your video display to your other rooms, or or from your projector to your rack, do it. Okay, because it's that way you will always be prepared for the future. Okay. All right. So any other before we now that's the bandwidth section of it. So let's talk about the stuff that has nothing to do with bandwidth. But any questions before we move on to that?
No, I think we're good right now. Yeah.
I know it's like so much stuff to talk about.
So a lot of this is for gaming, right? I mean, a lot of this will impact the end user, because people are wondering at home, if you're just streaming off of Netflix or you're watching an HD Blu-ray, a lot of this stuff is really not a concern.
No. Currently, if the biggest benefit, I mean, when it comes to resolution, frame rate, And a lot of the enhancement features, they are focused towards gaming.
Yeah.
There are some things that are focused towards the average movie and TV listener, and we'll cover that as well. So let's talk about the gaming ones real quick. The first one, variable refresh rate. We can go into hyper detail. It's explained in the glossary, but the best way to think of it is your gaming computer or your gaming console has a certain amount of processing power. If it's a simple thing to draw, me standing in front of a white background in a white t-shirt, I can draw that for those frames really, really quickly, right? Um, if I decide I want to draw me in front of a forest of trees, and I want to apply ray tracing and shadow to increase the shadow and the 3D and the depth and everything else, it requires more processing power, and I can't draw them as fast. The old system, what ended up happening was when it was the TV was always asking for the next frame. 60 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 60 frames per second. And if the computer could not draw that fast, it would have to send the file before it was completely drawn. So you end up with tearing, basically. It's halfway through the drawing, and they have to send it off to the TV because the TV's asking for it. So you end up with like a tree that looks like this because it was halfway writing it, and then all of a sudden it has to stop and start writing the next frame. And you're with like tearing. So what happens now is the TV and the display, the TV and the source talk to each other, and the TV will wait until the source can draw the frame before it is displayed. So so now, depending on how challenging the content is, the frame rate is changing on your display as well as your TV. I mean, the source as well as your TV, based on what the source can. It's better communication to write that. VRR is, think of it as generic, like and you will see that there is G-Sync and FreeSync. So whether you have an AMD graphics card or an NVIDIA graphics card, that would be like their brand. So think of it like Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. VRR is just a generic can of cola. It's the same concept, but it is open source. Everybody can use it. All right. Quick frame transport. What's that? Quick frame transport is, think of it as I had a conveyor belt, right? And that conveyor belt has bins on the conveyor belt. That's how the old system was. And even if I could draw the frame faster, I had to wait for the next bin to put the frame in. So now it's a conveyor belt with nothing on it. So as fast as I can draw the file, I can just send it off to the display. So as a gamer, my system has quick frame transport, and your display does not. And we both have PlayStation 5s. Both PlayStations can draw the frame fast. Your PlayStation has to wait before it can send the signal to your display. My PlayStation can send it immediately. I see you before you see me, and I kill you. Okay, so that's the benefit of quick frame transport. Auto latency mode. We talked about the fact that these systems have game modes that switch off all of the video enhancements. The less video enhancements you have, the quicker the signal can get from the source to your eyes. If I add upscaling and color correction and detail enhancement and contrast enhancement, it's almost like the signal has to go through this puzzle before it goes out the display, and it slows it down.
So in order to take advantage of these features on most TVs, you have to use the right input on the TV, right?
If it has HDMI 2.1, this is interesting. Most of the time when you see the inputs on a TV, many of these features are supported on all of the inputs. But one of the inputs may support the bandwidth. Like if you look at a Marantz or Denon receiver, our Marantz and Denon receivers support variable refresh rate, quick frame transport, auto latency mode on all of the inputs. But one of the inputs can support the additional bandwidth required for higher frame rate and higher resolution.
And that's the input that's closest to the output because the traces are shorter.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
now you have to look at each manufacturer. It's different. Some TV manufacturers, all of this stuff is supported on all the inputs, and on some TV manufacturers, it's only supported on the input that is labeled HDMI 2.1 or 40 or 8K or whatever that manufacturer would do.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is I have a couple of Sony TVs in the house, and I think they tell you to always use HDMI 2.
Yeah, probably. I think there's one. Yeah, I think one. Yeah, only one of them support all that stuff, but a lot of that is bandwidth based.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so anyway, you have this auto low latency mode. So basically, what it does is it switches the video, the receiver into its game mode, turns off all its video processing, so it adds no lag, and it tells the TV to switch off all of its video processing or as much of it as possible, so the signal gets through it faster. So so that's what, but it does it automatically. So if I'm playing Netflix on my PlayStation, I can have all my video enhancements on. The second I switch from Netflix to Gran Turismo, the receiver and the TV automatically switches to game mode. So you get
So how can you
optimized.
check that? How can you check that?
Most of the time when it happens, the receiver the TV will pop up. Boop, game mode.
Oh,
it'll
okay.
just do it. You can go into a Denon or Marantz receiver and see if it even is supported, or if that's possible by just looking at that input that I told you. It'll tell you if it doesn't say auto ALLM, it's not, you're not going to get it. Okay. The receiver, the TV, the receiver, make sure it's set to auto. It has a game mode that's built into the receiver. There's a menu setting. Just make sure it's set to auto, and just make sure, and then look at you got to talk to each TV manufacturer for their particular settings. Okay. All right. So moving on. So those are gaming based ones, right? Now, there's some stuff that will benefit you for gaming, but it also will benefit you for whether you're watching movies and video. Dynamic HDR is basically a generic version of what HDR10 Plus, which was developed by Samsung, and Dolby Vision, which was developed by Dolby, does. So, and that is assist the TV by providing frame-by-frame instructions to utilize for dynamic tone mapping to get the best HDR. And it's the same thing. Think of Dolby Vision as Coca-Cola. Think of HDR10 Plus as Pepsi-Cola. This is an open source generic version of that. Function capabilities are the same, just a generic version. All right, that can be utilized by everybody. All right. And then we'll talk a little bit more about eARC in a second. But quick media switching. This is possible because of VRR. What this is we've all done it, where you're watching, you bring up a menu for Netflix or on an Apple TV, and that menu system is at 60 frames per second. Then you decide you want to watch a movie, and you click on the movie, and the screen goes blank. Yeah. And then the movie plays. That is because whenever you switch frame rates in the past, you had to re-verify rights. So I went from the menu, which is 60, to the movie, which is 24, or from a broadcast, which is 30, to a movie that's 24. Every time I did that, I had to verify rights, and that verification meant a blank screen. On a projector, that blank screen could be seems like forever.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you match the frame rate on an Apple TV, or do you leave that off?
You always leave that off. The reason why they put those settings in was people were buying Apple TVs, and when it went from the menu system, which is an SDR or an HDR 60 to an HDR movie that was HDR 24, it was getting a blank screen, and people thought it was broken. So what they did was when they first built the Apple TV took everything, the Three Stooges, Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, and made it all 4K at 60 frames per second HDR. And the upscaling looked horrible, right? So that's why they added that match frame rate and match format. You're telling the machine not to do that. Show HDR at HDR, show SDR at SDR, and don't mess with the frame rates, but you'll get the blank screen.
So on my Apple TV, I don't have that selected, and anytime I look at the signal on the SR8015, it always says it's 12-bit.
Yeah, well, 12-bit is just the The 18 gigabits at most of the time you can do 12-bit at 18 gigabits per second. We're talking about the frame rates and
Right.
things like that. So if you looked at the frame rate through something like a 7G, I mean a 7 analyzer, you may see that everything is 60 frames per second, and 24 shown at 60 looks wacky. Okay, so we always say turn on match format and match frame rate. Always, if you want to get the best out of an Apple TV. But
Okay.
all that was done because people thought the blank screen was broken. Remember we said that VRR is you can feed different frame rates and the TV will adapt?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it can't go blank every time there's a shift in frame rates. So if it's not going blank every time there's a shift in frame rates in a game, why would it go blank if there's a shift in frame rate from the menu system to broadcast to watching a movie? So it's just basically a version of VRR, but it's being utilized to eliminate the blanking that people hate when they go from the menu to the movie. Pretty cool, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like it's a game-related, VR is just a game-related thing, but you can't have quick media switching without them figuring out VRR. And then the last one, of course, is enhanced audio return channel. And what that is there's two audio return channels. The only way you're going to get multi-channel audio from most services built into a TV and most sources plugged into a TV back to your receiver. If you use optical, most of the time it will be down converted to 2 channels. So all you're going to get is Dolby Surround. If you want Dolby Atmos or you want IMAX Enhanced or you want DTSX or something like that, you have to use either ARC or eARC. ARC required some compression. eARC is uncompressed, the same quality as if I plugged that Blu-ray player that was plugged into my TV directly into my receiver. This can be done because if you look at an HDMI cable, they used to call HDMI with Ethernet. Well, they took that Ethernet wire and now they send a video signal down that. So a lot of times people will go out and Chana from Technodad went out and had an eARC source, an eARC enabled Denon receiver, and an eARC enabled TV, and he wasn't getting it because of the HDMI cable he was using did not have with Ethernet. So it didn't have the wire to run that through. All HDMI 2.1 or ultra high speed cables have to have the wire allotted to run eARC. Okay. HDMI cables are much, 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 much easier. But you want this because remember we just talked about the majority of sources you're going to get in the future in 8K. If you're not a gamer, it's probably going to be built into the TV. How are you going to get the surround sound out if you do not have, if you're not connected via ARC? Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, Eric. So we go back to Eric. Turn off. You want to turn on match format and match frame rate on an Apple TV. That's the very first thing you do when you buy an Apple TV. Turn those on. Okay.
Here's where we have a comment. So you agree with this then? Basically do SDR, 4K, 60, and match dynamic range and frame rate.
Yeah. Well, you can leave it at HDR. You can leave it at HDR 4K 60 and set match frame rate and match format because you're telling it I can support a maximum of HDR, but if it's not in HDR, don't show it to me in HDR. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I have to go and change the settings on my Apple TV.
Okay. Now somebody was asking about the latency of balance and what would they introduce? I haven't tested it, but I bet you we're talking less than a millisecond. So I bet you, that's a really good test for projector reviews. I may do that for my other, if you could look at my other site, projectorreviews.com, make sure you support that too. What I actually have some high speed, brand new Meridio balance. And what I'll do is I'll test the latency through a cable versus through a their top of the line HDMI extender balance with, I don't know, 100 feet of Cat 6. And we'll see what the difference is. And I bet you it's negligible. Okay. Jason says hi. What's up, Jason? I get a lot of stuff from him because I hang out with him all the time. All right. So we've already talked about variable refresh rate. We already talked about all these different things. We already talked about finding out what those features are. There's a couple ways to do it. You can hope the manufacturer tells you, but how do you know if your system is connected properly? Because even if the TV supports it and the source supports it, you may have a setting incorrect in your AVR or in your switcher, or your balun doesn't support it, or or something's going on. So having it inside the receiver is the repeater in the middle of everything, and it's looking both ways. It'll tell you what's going through. Okay, so that's a cool thing. If you want to learn more about this, I actually posted a video on United on the United YouTube channel where I go through HDMI and I actually show you the single adapter, the 3 in, 3 out, the new 1700, and I have an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Meridio 7G 8K test pattern generator, and a high-end gaming PC connected. And I went through and showed you all of those things and even the settings in the gaming PC and the Xbox and the PlayStation. So look at that. Okay.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description for people. It's Sound United Training. It's
Let's do United training on YouTube because that's the reason why we built that. Now. Yeah, it's because everybody blames the black box in the middle when there's a problem, and 90% of the time it's not us. Okay. Yep. So here. So I think before I go through and look at the questions, there's another thing that we want to talk about. This just popped up. HDMI 2.1A.
Hey, yeah.
What the heck is that? So basically what's happening is it's another feature that they're going to be adding, which is called source-based tone mapping. What that is most of the time, there's two ways that you tone map. Actually 3 ways. One way is you take the max max FRL, and the maximum pixel, I can't remember the names right now. They're max fall and max whatever. And you take that information that's provided static in the signal, and based on that, you determine what's the brightness capability of your display, and you basically try to bend that picture using that static number. That's static tone mapping. The other way is dynamic. That information for the brightest pixel in the scene and the average frame level of the scene is shown to you frame by frame by frame. And then the TV takes that information and adjusts itself to give you the most based on its capabilities. The other way that better TVs do it is better TVs will measure it itself and frame by frame by frame, Sony's, LG's, Samsung's. And then what it will do is it will then use the measurement it took to make those adjustments. Things like this big JVC, that's what it does. It measures it frame by frame or scene by scene and makes fine adjustments based on that to optimize itself. So those are the 3 current ways of doing it. Another way that you may notice is if you buy a game system, it tells you adjust for HDR, and it says, crank this, hit the up arrow until you can see the star or whatever. Hit the down arrow in a dark scene until you can see the star or whatever. And it takes that information and it helps it sends out, it does its own tone mapping that can be used in addition to the display's tone mapping. That's called source-based tone mapping. So people will go out and buy what's called a MAD VR or some of these big outside boxes that basically do the tone mapping for your display. What they'll be able to do is they can apply your computer, your gaming console, your set-top box, your future Apple TV may be able to do this as well. So basically, it knows what your display can do, and it shrinks the material for the display before it sends it off. Okay, so this is not a new HDMI standard. It's just a new way to send signal to a display. It's the same signal, HDR10, PQ, which is the basis, ST2084 or PQ. That's the standard, which is the basis for HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and Dolby Vision. So it's still using that standard. All right. It doesn't replace HDR10 Plus. It doesn't replace Dolby Vision. The cool thing is it's possible to add via support for this via firmware because it doesn't require any additional bandwidth. It all depends on the capabilities and the processing power that is built in to the displays. Okay. I mean, into the source material. Okay. So that's the last one that everybody keeps asking me about. All right. And like I said, if you want to learn more about this stuff, we add a lot on our Sound United training channel, or you could check out projector reviews. If you do projector reviews on YouTube, there's a bunch of stuff there from my other company where I talk to guys like Jason Dusto and Joel Silver and stuff like that. All right. So
yeah. So one last thing about that AB thing about the A is lossless and B is lossy.
Yeah.
One of your competitors has future update coming for 4K 120 AB, 8K 60 AB, and then it just says 4K 60. 4K 60 is never compressed.
4K 60 doesn't require compression because it's only 18.
Doesn't require.
It's only 18, you know.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you don't have to worry about it. Okay. So, but like I said, future update, you know.
Future update, yeah.
Yeah. Ours is currently, now, right now.
Yeah.
AB, you know. And if it says future update AB,
yeah.
And you, what is it doing right at this second? You know what I mean? So
right.
we have to compare apples, and that's because at the time that the boards were built, you can buy a multi-input B, or you could buy a single input AB. Now, has that changed? Yeah, but it's a different board. You know, you can't just pull out the old one and slap in the new one. You know, it does require some engineering. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, let's see. Let's look at some of these questions.
A performance question I have for you sometimes, and maybe this is a setting on the Apple TV. If I'm playing some Dolby Vision content, I tend to notice I'm not even talking about a projector. I'm talking about on a Sony TV. The colors are often too bright, like almost like the contrast is cranked all the way up. And then when you go into the TV settings, you only have like 3 different dynamic range settings that are all by Dolby Vision. How do you circumvent that? Like, what is it? Because I'm not matching the frame rate with the Apple TV, and it's causing.
Yeah, you want to match frame rate, match from format, because first thing the thing is doing is taking your stuff that's not in HDR and making it HDR.
Yeah.
So it's already whacked out, and then your motion is going to be bad. You know, you get soap opera effect like crazy because it's 24p stuff that's been cranked up. So match format, match frame rate. A lot of times Dolby Vision is trying to optimize the performance of the capabilities of the display, but it still requires calibration. Is still a good thing to go in and work on the white balance and work on the CMS color management system to dial it in. Because think of it this way: Dolby Vision is assuming think of it as that the starting point is 0. Okay. The starting point is 0 because the reference TV that LG or Sony provided him, this was the reference point on it, right? But there's manufacturing variances. So yours may be -1, yours may be +1. And all calibration does is make sure your TV is at 0, which is where they started at to begin with. Okay. So when the stuff is applied, it is applied properly to a flat reference. So I do it all the time. Like I show people, if you look at 2 projectors, the before is completely different. And if I run the signal, they look completely different. Then if I go in, I calibrate them, the colors are the same. And then just because one projector may be better because it has better black levels or type of thing. So calibration, even with Dolby Vision, is important. I did a little video with Jason Dustel on Meridio has these little test patterns. And if you go to our projector reviews site, I did it with him. And it's like, here's these free test patterns. So you can go in and make minor adjustments to your contrast and your brightness and, you know, picking the right picture modes and things like that. So those are helpful as well. But cool. Yeah, a lot of times if it looks funky, I bet you if you make the adjustments on your Apple TV, look better. Is your TV calibrated, Gene?
I mean, not professionally. I did it with the test disc a long time ago. I mean,
Okay,
for
okay.
standard content, it looks fine. It's just when I play certain Dolby Vision
Mhm.
stuff, like I think it was watching something with Star Wars. I don't know if it wasn't Mandalorian. It was
Yeah.
something that was in Dolby Vision, and then
Mhm.
like when the fire scene happened,
It was just wacky.
it was way too bright. Like it was
Okay.
a torch.
Okay. What I would tell you too is there's a new Spears and Munsell HDR test pattern disc that
Yeah,
has remember I was talking about there's contrast patterns and brightness patterns and stuff. It's on that disc, and you'll be amazed at how you can kind of tweak that. And I believe it even has Dolby Vision content on it. So you can go in there, you can run the test patterns
but
and
if you
try
do
to.
that on a Blu-ray player, is it going to translate that same calibration setting to an Apple TV?
It'll be close as
Yeah,
long as you're in match frame rate, and match format. It'll be close. A lot of times the difference is the disk is consistent, 60
yeah,
gigabits per megabits per second or gigabits per second, and your streaming may vary, and you may end up with like MPEG, a little bit more compression because the bandwidth for your streaming is doing this.
gotcha.
Okay,
Cool.
so okay, so let's see here. Let's see if there's a couple. I mean, it's up to you, Gene. We can stay as long as you want. I know we started a little late. I'm just
You
looking
can
at.
answer a couple of questions here.
Okay,
Let me
so
see.
I'm
Let me
just
pull
looking
one
through
up
here.
here.
Okay.
Let's see.
Actually, am I getting myself in trouble?
Uh,
Yeah. So yeah, I just saw Joel and Jason online. I was looking forward. I was hoping I was going to get a chance to spend some time with them at CES. But CES, we could have a whole conversation about CES.
yeah,
It wasn't. A lot of people just didn't go. So hopefully
yeah, I
I'll
was
see.
pretty dead. Yeah, so Jason lives in Tampa, so I'm gonna have him over here and have him help me calibrate some of my
Yeah, 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 yeah,
displays
yeah.
one of these times.
Yeah, it's
Small
good to
world,
have
yeah.
that done. It's amazing how much of a. I mean, if you have a good quality TV, what's the display do you have?
The Sony 900 or
Yeah, yeah,
950H.
yeah. So
Yeah,
they're so the modern displays are getting so much better. If you look at
yeah.
Sony's and LG's and Samsung's, they don't take a lot to get them right. You start
They
with the
really
movie
don't. I mean,
mode.
you just gotta get the black level right, the color's usually right. So
Yeah.
this is a question that's been bugging me for a while, and I know the answer now only because someone from HBO Max, is actually a fan of the channel, and he
Mhm,
was emailing me privately because we
mhm,
did a whole thing about Apple TV,
mhm.
and basically, they're asking, "Why does the Apple TV send out PCM when everything's set to Bitstream?" And it's because it follows the Dolby Mat,
Mhm.
which I don't fully understand what the hell that is. It's weird.
Yeah.
I assume it could be lossless or lossy,
Mhm.
but it's a different codec than Dolby True HD or Dolby Digital Plus, right?
The Apple TV is its own little, and that's a whole nother thing. We can have
Oh, I know,
a
it's
whole
crazy.
nother
Yeah,
session just on PCM, Bitstream, Dolby
yeah.
Digital
Because the
Plus, and
Xbox does the same thing. It'll send it out as multi-channel PCM
mhm.
when
Yeah.
it's a 5.1 signal, and I thought there was, like, some weird setting going on with my balance or something, and it turned out that's just what the Xbox does. Unless it's
Mhm,
a native Atmos signal, you're not gonna see it say
mhm,
Dolby Digital 5.1 or anything like that.
mhm.
It just says PCM when you go through the Marantz receivers or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Denon
yeah,
receivers.
yeah. I mean, when it's Dolby Atmos, it will light up Atmos,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but a lot of times you'll just see,
You know
multi-channel
what's sad? I have a
PCM.
little OCD with that. Anytime I put on something that's streaming in Atmos, I always have to hit that info button to make sure I'm getting
Yeah.
Atmos.
Well, I will tell you that I on my Marantz, I always have the door flipped down
So
so
you
I
could
can
see
see
it.
what's going on. And what happened is I've done it a million times. I'll start off, I was like, oh, I'm gonna watch, Boba Fett. And I'll start on my Roku and I'll look and
Mhm.
it'll say that it comes out, it's available in Dolby Vision or Dolby Atmos, and I look over there and I'll see like Bitstream or two, and I'm like, stop. I go to the Apple TV.
Roku pisses me off because I have a Roku and an Apple TV, and on the Roku box, it says it supports Atmos and Dolby Vision,
Uh,
but it does not my Roku does not play Atmos for Netflix, and I kept
neither,
sending emails
yeah,
to their tech
yeah.
support, and they cryptically said that it's Netflix's fault, not their
Yeah,
fault.
yeah, and yeah. So a lot of times I'll start a movie and my wife is like, "What are you doing?" And I will stop it and say, "I got I got to switch to the Apple TV
I
for
do
this
the
one."
same thing. My wife gets she gets so annoyed by that.
It's fine. It's no, it's not fine. I didn't spend
It's
all this
not.
money for the surround sound system.
Yeah,
I'm
I
get
wanna hear my tops. I don't wanna virtualize them. I want them native.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
people are asking, I'm curious, when are you guys doing a model refresh or update?
um, I like my job, so
It's alright.
I can't tell you that. I will tell you that we do have some exciting products coming down the pipeline this year, and I'm
Uh-huh.
sure you and I, Gene, are going to be talking about a lot of cool things.
Oh, man.
But I can't tell you what, and I can't tell you when.
Okay.
That is like my mantra for the training department because I like doing these videos and talking to you. And
Yep,
I will
yep.
say that if you're a fan of Sound United products, there's a lot of really cool stuff coming this year
Well,
that
I have to tell you that I've tested a lot of newer receivers, in the last few months, and to this day, the SR8015 is still the benchmark in my testing for
Mhm,
Atmos receivers.
mhm.
So,
Yeah,
it might be old
yeah.
or not old, but it's older,
Mhm.
but that thing just hits every checkpoint and
Oh yeah,
all the bench performances and everything I've done. So,
yeah,
yeah, I love that receiver. The
yeah,
only complaint I have is your receivers run hot.
yeah.
AC
They run warm.
Infinity AC Infinity will be your friend if you
Yeah,
own
they
a Sound
bias
United product.
towards A. It's an AB, but they bias towards A.
Yeah,
Somebody was asking about, so let's go through these real quick. Are we going to see 8K Blu-ray players and 8K discs?
right, I can't
Unless
find
they
those.
apply a massive amount of compression to the disk, there's a finite amount of space that lives on that disk, and
Yep,
that disk supports 60 gigabits per second for about 2.5 hours. All right. The second I go, and that is enough for 4K at 24 frames per second at 12-bit with Dolby Atmos and 5 different languages. Right. The second I try to shove 8K on there is going to require a massive amount of compression and decompression, and that compression scheme is probably not built into your current Blu-ray player. So it means I got to come up with a disc that will hold more data, or come up with an aggressive compression scheme and make sure that the unit can decompress it. Okay, so right now, and yeah, I would suggest that probably the way you're going to first see it is going to be on streaming services or maybe a mega kaleidoscope. Because guess what? A kaleidoscope is a download. And if the file is bigger, it just downloads a bigger file. So you're probably going to be more likely to see it on either streaming, higher bandwidth required to stream that in your house, or a download option from a company like Kaleidoscape would be my.
when I realized that Blu-ray is a dying format and we're never probably gonna see an optical disc better than what we have right now? It's when Oppo got out of the Blu-ray business.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, it's not. There's a bunch of fanboys like us that like disc,
Yeah,
but a lot of people, the streaming, people like the convenience of streaming. They like being able to pick a movie and have it pop up right away,
yeah.
or buy it one time on my Apple TV in my living room and have it in my bedroom and have it in my den and watch it on my when I'm traveling and stuff like that. So people just so yeah, it's just the convenience of that. And as bandwidth gets higher, um, the need to put on a physical disc as you get 500 meg or 500 gig or like a 1 gig Wi-Fi in your house. Do you really need a disc? Your
Yeah.
house can pull more data than your disc can.
I
Somebody's
just
asked.
want I want lossless audio through
uh,
streaming, especially
yeah,
for Atmos music.
yeah,
That
yeah,
would be like
yeah.
icing on the cake if we see that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fingers crossed. This is up to the streaming services. The bandwidths are going up. It's just do they want to pull the trigger? Somebody's saying, boom, 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 boom. The difference is there a difference between having that VRR thing and not having it when the computer slows down frame rates? Okay.
Oh, you're way back in those questions.
Well, I'm just looking at some of them.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're a gamer and you want fluid gaming with no tearing, and you're gonna want VRR. That's just the way it is because I have to pick between the two. If if I don't want any tearing or basically video distortion or jacked up looking pictures, I have to turn down all the things. I have to do a couple of things: reduce the resolution, reduce the frame rate, or reduce the things called ray tracing, which makes it look real. Pick two. Which two do you want? You want the resolution and the frame rate? You don't get shadow detail. You want the shadow detail and you want the frame rate? Drop the resolution to HD. Okay. You and most displays, most of these projectors now can do HD at 200. Actually, yeah, HD at 240 frames per second. As a gamer, that's better. I'd rather have HD at 240 frames per second with 4.2 milliseconds versus having 8K resolution in the gaming experience if you're a competitive gamer. All right. So keep that in mind. But VRR is ensures that your display and your gaming system are in perfect sync to give you the best picture it can produce at that second. Okay. And that's what makes that a cool trick. All right.
Here's another one for you.
Does send the luminance metadata to display frame per frame so that the software can tone map or adjust? Good question. I haven't seen it yet. But probably what they're probably going to do is it depends on how it overlays with dynamic HDR. So theoretically, this SBTM could be applied to a display that has static tone mapping, because you get the big shifts. The system will deal with the shifts before it sends the signal to your display. How it interacts with Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus, I don't know yet. I haven't seen it yet, and the information has not been forthcoming. They just announced this crazy thing at CES and haven't provided any real detail.
So here's a philosophical question, or somewhat technical. How big? It really depends how far away you're from the TV, but how big should a display be so you can see the benefits of 8K? I mean, we're getting direct view LED TVs now that are $80,000. They're only 1080p.
Yeah, exactly. So the best way to think of it is it comes down to what's called visual acuity. Based on your vision. If you have 20/20 vision, how close can you sit before you start to see the pixels that make up the image? And the way that that's normally done on a 16:9 display or a 235 display, they utilize what's called picture height. Okay, so an HD signal TV, if you sit closer than 3 picture heights from that TV, so say that TV is this size, the picture height. So say this is 2 feet. If I sit closer than 6 feet from that, I may, if I have really sharp vision, be able to see the pixels. If I go to 4K, it becomes 1.5 picture heights. So if it's a 2-foot thing, now if I sit 3.5 feet, I get to 3.5 feet before I see the picture heights. If I go to 8K, it becomes 0.7 picture heights, which means if it's 2 feet, I can sit with less than 2 feet away from that display and see picture height and do it. So what does that apply? Projectors, because I can have a 180-inch screen and sit 10 feet or 12 feet from it, or gaming displays where you're sitting this close to the freaking thing, so those are the two places where it applies. It's more about, so now on your desk for your gaming, you could have like Samsung, Samsung was showing a 55-inch gigantic curved gaming display that people are going to be sitting less than 2 feet from,
Wow.
And that's where it comes. So it's not really about the size. It's about, think of that picture height thing. If I want to sit really close, really, 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 really close to something really, 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 really big, you want 8K. If you're going to be sitting 12 feet from a 65-inch TV, scientifically, you can't see a difference. Focus on contrast, focus on frame rate, focus on color reproduction, because you can see that difference whether you're 25 feet away or 2 feet away. If you want really big and sit really close, 85-inch TV in a small den, that's where 8K really starts coming in. or 55-inch monitor as a desktop display.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Someone was
Very
asking
interesting.
what must-have feature in 2022 should I have in receivers? I want to ask you, will HEOS ever support Atmos streaming?
That is a very good question. That's one of the things that they have to work on. Um, I'm not sure if the current board could support that, because remember,
Mhm.
it's how many outputs are on that board, to feed the amplifiers. But in the future, is it possible? It's possible. It just depends on, but it's only like I can't tell you. I can't tell you when. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it could definitely happen. Um, what's the feature I want that would make you want to wait for the next crop of receivers? We're not gonna have to worry about resolution for a long time. You know, um, I would say maybe more multi-channel streaming capabilities, or if depending on your system, more channels of processing for Dolby Atmos and DTSX. Remember, it isn't the limitation is not the format, it's the processing and that has been released from by both manufacturers. So
So the
if
only
you
way to do that is you can increase the channel density,
Mhm.
but if you start putting more amplifier channels, you're going to run out of space real quick. You got to switch to Class D.
And that's the next thing,
Yeah.
is what you'll probably start seeing is a lot of receivers are still utilizing Class AB amplification. And
Mhm.
based on, like you said, the heat and the need to get rid of the thermal needs of the receiver, you can only put so many channels in a box before it overheats everything in the box, right?
Yep.
As digital amplifiers are getting better and better and better. If you don't believe that, go listen to a Marantz Model 30 or or a PM10 or a Marantz PMKI Ruby. Those are all digital and they sound ridiculously good.
Yeah.
So, but
Yep.
those generate far less heat, which
Yep.
means if you're
My
going to
whole theater room is Class D.
yeah, exactly. So
And
now because of Class D, I can pack more high-powered channels information of amplification into the same box. So now I could probably easily exceed 11 channels of amplification in a realistic chassis. So I could take advantage of more speakers. The question is, Eric, will your wife let you put all those extra speakers in your space? Honey, I want to put 25 speakers in my house. If you can get
yeah.
by that, that'll be the next thing. Um,
I consulted a guy a couple of days ago. He had a really nice apartment in Manhattan that he owned,
mhm,
and he put all active Genlex speakers on his
mhm,
Storm audio processor, all done in the digital connections. He
mhm,
had 15 speakers in a small area. I'm like, your wife must love you.
mhm, mhm. I know, I know. There's some questions about HDMI. We could spend a whole day on that. That was one. If you check out the conversation that I had with Joel and Jason on Projector Reviews website
Mhm.
about that document, that's the one of the ones we put up. Actually, no, we did that here. I'm sorry, soundunited.com, the one that I did with Jason and Joel. We talk about that. The whole benefit of that document that Jane's going to share the glossary is to help people work through the issues. And most of the time, when all of a sudden your HDMI works and it doesn't work, or you switch an input and the input doesn't fire up and your TV's on blank, has to
Yeah.
do with either eat it problems or hot plug detection or 5 volt. And this document talks about there's troubleshooting things in it to help you figure out and all that stuff. So they're trying to help the industry figure this out and help the manufacturers figure this out. So this is great idea of HDMI 2.1 capabilities, but the goal is to make sure everybody's on the same page. But you as a consumer, don't worry about HDMI 2.1 on a box because it's a meaningless. I want to stress that meaningless. What you need to do is you need to ask about what bandwidth is supported and what features from HDMI 2.1 are supported. And if they say 40 and all of them, that's maybe one manufacturer, and one may be, well, 22 gigabits per second with compression, to give you 4K 120 and eARC, and that's it. So you can't really depend on if someone does put the logo on the box. I would actually say, are you really telling me the truth? What's going on? Where's the VRR?
Is it a good assumption to assume if you have an HDMI 2.1 receiver, it should support eARC, or is that still optional?
If it has a 2.1 receiver, all the all the Denon and Marantz stuff supports eARC with HDMI 2.0 B, because it's part of the 2.1 standard, but because it doesn't require much additional bandwidth, does not mean you cannot apply it to a 2.0 B display. So for device, so for example, the current AV8805 or last year's 60 Denon and Marantz AVRs that are 2 or 3 years old support auto low latency mode and eARC, because neither one of those are bandwidth related. So why not, if I can do it on a firmware, do it on a firmware?
Oh,
It's the things that require more bandwidth, or the processor built into it is just not capable, that we did not add.
Right.
Okay.
All right, Phil. Well, we appreciate you dropping all this HDMI knowledge. Guys, I'm going to put this PowerPoint presentation that Phil did for us on our Patreon channel. If you want to go and download it and go through the slides as you watch this video, if you're not watching this live with us, go to our Patreon at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support on the channel. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest topics or have new video discussions. And we got to get Phil back to talk more about these new AV products coming down the pipe for Sound United. Don't want to get you in trouble, Phil, so we'll do it when you're allowed.
Exactly. But like I said, I'm looking at these questions in the audience. There's a lot. You could tell there's a lot of people that are confused, or people that are just passionate. They just want to know what the real deal is.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, Gene, that you're really trying to get the message across. And I'm actually happy that Sound United is really trying to make sure that we help eliminate the confusion and stuff like that, because we want the customers to have a better, your viewers and our customers to have the best experience possible. And we can come back anytime. Let me know when you want to come back and talk about something else.
Phil, I love having you here, and I appreciate you taking all this time at night to do this with us, and we will definitely have you soon.
Okay, excellent.
And until next time, my friends,